Alright, we're going to see what this does for us now. Alright, testing. So here today I'm going to show you how I mixed these vocals on this track within the short time that we did it. I think we went through 4 songs in 2 hours or something like that. I think maybe it was 5. I'm not sure, but a couple of them he just had just a verse to do, just on a feature. So let's see. So on this one, and of course when we're doing stuff like that, we kind of have to take the track for how it sounds and then make the vocals, sound the same way that the track does, for it to sound, like one piece of music, instead of like these vocals sound like they were completely done differently than these ones were. So you kind of got to match them up a little bit, but also if there's like any issues with the vocals or the track here, then still we want our vocals to still sound good though, right? So we don't want to negatively impact the vocals, but we want to just make them sound like they fit in with the rest of the track. So we want to just make it non-destructive. We don't want to do anything that's going to make it sound bad, but we don't want it to stick out like a sore thumb either. So here's the track. First of all, I'm going to turn off all of the effects by pressing the letter E, which is what I have it shortcutted to. And so now let's hear just everything with no effects at all. Of course, because there's no compression turned on or anything like that, everything sounds much quieter, right? Because there's no boosting going on or whatnot. Okay, alright, so that's the first run through, just hearing the entire project with no effects on it, and just kind of mixed together with what we have, just the instrumental and then these vocals mixed together to themselves. So now I'm going to turn all the effects back on, but I'm going to go through and start turning these on one by one though. So let me turn everything off. These last ones are just meters. And we're going to mute the reverb and delay bus. We'll mute those. You can't see those. That's on my other screen. Damn it. Sorry about that. Yeah, so when I stream, I need to do disable floating on that. And then I can just go back and forth like this. To do that, I've set up my own keyboard shortcut. I'll hold Alt, and then either the number 1 or 2 will let me pick which screen I want. Screen 1 will be the edit screen. Screen 2 is my mixing screen. And the reason I have it that way, with this being 1 and that being 2, is because usually I'm working on 2 monitors in the studio, and screen 1 would be the one on the left, and then screen 2, this would be the one on the right side. So that's kind of how they got named 1 and 2 the way that they did. Okay, but so now I've got them both here, so when I go back and forth to the mix screen, you can see what I'm doing here. But all I'm doing is I've turned off all of the effects on the main vocal channel. I'm going to mute these other vocal channels, and I've turned off the effects on the vocal bus, and I've turned off the effects on the instrumental bus and the mastering bus. And I've also muted out the reverb and delay buses. Alright, so now all that's going to happen is I'm going to, first of all, and also just to let you know, so when we're on this screen, whichever channel that I click on here, it's going to show you that channel here and then the bus that it feeds into here. Okay, so this is the bus that it feeds into. And then if I want to see the master, I can click here also, and then that's the master channel. And that's usually just kind of hidden down here. I'll maybe just leave it down here just for ease of access, because I might go back and forth to it a couple times during this demonstration. So now the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my effects for the instrumental. Right, so one by one I'm going to do those. And all I'm really doing is I'm feeding it first of all through a multiband compressor. And on this one I'm not really doing so much. I have a half a decibel boost on the highs, 0.2 decibel boost on the mid highs, the mids, nothing to them, 0.6 decibel, so not even a decibel cut on the low mids, and also not even a decibel cut on the lows either. But I do have some cuts going on there, barely. And then the next thing I'm going to do on the instrumental is I'm going to turn on the equalizer if I need to. And listening to this one, it doesn't sound like it really needs it. It sounds okay. I get some instrumentals sometimes that the EQing is thrown way out of whack, and I will have to do some EQing on it. So this one doesn't sound like that. Of course, we're listening to it, I guess, fairly quiet at the moment, comparatively. But we'll hear it more, and basically what will happen is I'll revisit the EQing and all of that stuff kind of after we get some boosting going on, and we increase the loudness. Then I'll revisit my EQs if I need to. So we'll come back to this. Even though it's the first thing in line, it's just because it's the first thing I want to process. It's not going to make the biggest impact up front, right? Usually the boosting and limiting is going to be where stuff starts to get loud and exciting. But this matters a lot for the tone of everything and making stuff sound clean. So, alright, so next thing is the EQ, but like I said, I don't feel like I need to do that. So then the next thing I do is turn on just a limiter, and I just boost it just to a certain volume level. And generally what I'm looking for is on my bus that the beat feeds through, I'm wanting it to get just to about -6. Just to about -6. If I get one line of yellow on the metering, I'm okay with that. But if I can get right under -6 and not get a single line of yellow, that's where I want to be. But one line of yellow is acceptable for me. And you can see that to get to that volume level here on our limiter, my final output, I'm only reducing by 0.1 of a decibel. Right, so I'm not cutting off a whole bunch. 0.1 of a decibel, not even a decibel, right? And then this is showing me the gain reduction. Now to get the volume up to about the -6 level, including the 0.1 loss that I'm taking right here, or limit that I'm doing right here, you can see that I had to boost it to the point to where it did limit off 1.7 decibels off of the kick drum that was playing here. So if I take it back again, so you see there is some reduction going on here, but very little, less than 2 decibels. So then this is the last thing that the beat is going to go through. If the EQing is not bad, then there's nothing else that I'm going to do to this other than whatever I need to do with the multiband, which is usually really subtle, and then I'm just going to boost it to get it to a relative level of volume. And now after that, now I'm going to start mixing the vocals in. So now I'm going to click on channel 2, and you can see all of the effects here are off, and all of the group effects are off. And if I go to the other screen here, you'll see that I've muted the reverb and delay. I can turn those on real quick. Just so you can hear that they're actually doing something. You see, so they do something, but you just don't hear it a whole lot right now because all the other effects are off. So let me close that limiter, get it out of the way. Now I'm just going to start turning these on. So my Deesser is the first thing that I want to do, is because I want to get rid of the sibilance right up front. I'm not trying to have that stuff in my EQs, my compressors, nothing. I want to get rid of that sibilance up front. Now the problem is, you can't really tell how much this is affecting it until after you have some other stuff going on. So this is kind of like the multiband that I explained over the instrumental. Even though you don't hear that the most, it's very subtle. the boost kind of makes everything loud and exciting, but this is important and it needs to be done first before boosting. That's kind of the same thing going on here with the de-essing. Even though it's not, we're not going to be able to even hear really what we're doing yet, I kind of like it to be first in line. So then I'm going to do a gate, and all a gate does is anything below a certain volume that's just background noise, it's just going to cut it out to 0. And so when he stops talking, you can see there's a little bit of noise going on down here, but it's underneath this threshold that I've set. And anytime the volume goes below this threshold, it just cuts it out to 0. Right? Or in this case, I don't have it going all the way down to 0. I have it cutting down a bunch, but this would be 0. And I just have it cutting out like 27-ish or whatever decibels, kind of like halfway from this meter, because it's at that point pretty well silent. You can't hear it against everything else, and it kind of just adds a little bit of warmth to have just a little bit of noise here and there. So I do not cut it down to 0 all the time. In this case, you can see that I don't, but a lot of times I do. Like if it's like an R&B track or something like that, and there's going to be more moments of silence, I'm going to cut that down to 0. I want there to be silence when there's silence. You know what I mean? But in this case, it's kind of like filler. It's just letting a little bit of that noise come through that might not get cut out. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to now add a little bit of drive to the voice. And I am running through a little bit of outboard gear on my way in. So I think that the vocals already have some saturation that I like on the way in, so I don't do too much on here. This isn't normally where I have it, but I do usually just have it to where I can see 2 little bars here. Just, there you go, 1 little notch, right? And that's just to add a little bit of distortion. It doesn't need to be very much. And sometimes, in an extreme case, or if I just want a bit more saturation, I might boost this up to like around there, which I'm not sure what that is. That says 7 decibels. But that's kind of the most, because after that it's like a guitar distortion, you know. It just sounds bad. It doesn't sound warm after a certain point. And so I just want to add a little bit of noise there, just a little bit of distortion there to warm that up. And so that's going to be the next thing. And then now I'm going to compress, and the compression is where we're going to hear stuff get louder. So both of these actually. So now generally with my first compressor in line, there's a couple of things that I generally want to look for. My ratio, my knee, my attack and release time, and then, but besides my functions, what I'm using these functions for is to achieve a certain thing with the gain reduction. Right? So I want there to be some kind of action going on. I should just see a tiny bit of green coming down, almost always, not really. Like when he stops, of course, it's going to be nothing. But anytime he's talking, I want to see just a hair of green coming down, but at the most, I want to do -9. And what I want to average is around -3. Right? So I'm looking for my green thing to like pop down around -3, and maybe some high parts where it's reducing a bunch, meaning that he had a loud part or something like that, right? But I'm looking for like an average of just under -3. So you see, that's kind of where it's floating. Oh, we got an Amber Alert. So I'm looking for that with my gain reduction. Now you can see that it peaked at 8.6. We can reset that. So he's got some peaks up there, but for the most part, it's hovering around -3. And that's kind of where I want to be. And then from that point, I kind of listen to it to determine my ratio. Like if it feels too squeezed, then I'm going to reduce on the ratio, you know, and open it up a little bit, I guess you could say. And then my attack time and release time, those kind of vary. 5 millisecond attack time is pretty fast. And sometimes I'm generally going with like a 10 millisecond attack time, 15 millisecond attack time, somewhere around there. In my release time, I'm generally going for pretty quick on that though, like 10 milliseconds to 20 milliseconds there also. Just the thing with release times is the faster you release on it, the more distortion you're going to get out of whichever plugin. And the same thing with your attack time. The faster you have it attack, it's going to add some distortion there also. And distortion isn't always bad. Some people don't even notice it, but engineers generally can. And it's more noticeable when you're looking at the meters and you see it pop down, and then you hear the distortion as you see it. So then seeing it with your eyes makes it stand out more with your ears too. When you're just hearing it without looking at any kind of meters or anything like that, it's really hard to tell though, and most people can't tell. But so I've set where I've set because I'm achieving this goal that I want for my gain reduction. And then on my attack time, the reason I would go with a faster attack, generally just my template will start with a faster attack because it's better to attack too fast than too slow, right? And you have loud parts pop out at you. And so for the sake of time saving when we're moving pretty quick in a session, a faster attack is better than a slower attack. So that's why I would have it generally template set to 5. But if there's time in the session, then I'm gonna pop in there and I'm gonna usually change that to 10 and see if I like it better. And I may go to 15 too. Yeah, but see, just right there sounds perfect compared to the 5 millisecond. Yep, so we're gonna leave that there at the 10 millisecond. And then for my output, I'm just looking to meter around -6. If I pop a little bit above -6, I'm okay with that because a little further down the line, I have a hard brick wall limiter and it's just gonna limit those. But so with that limiter in mind though, you know, I don't wanna push this too hard, and you see it just had a moment of red right there, but that's okay. That's it doesn't give you a click or a clipping noise or anything like that. And the limiter down the line catches it too, so it wouldn't clip red like that further down the line. But so that's what I'm looking for here, and that's why this is set where it's at. The only thing that I did change here was the attack time that I have on the compressor there. Otherwise, this is all where I would be looking for as a starting point. And again, it's all kind of in motion, right? So I'm going to knock out each one of these as I go, but as things get louder and more compressed and you can hear it better, then I start working on mastering, then you start to hear more and more flaws, right? So then you revisit this and you touch it up, and then you revisit your EQ and you touch it up, you know. So that's why I was saying, like, even though I have like the Deesser first in line, I'm going to revisit it before I do my final master. I'm going to pop it open again, and then I'm going to make some adjustments to it because now I can hear better what it's doing because there's mastering involved. But okay, so let's move on here. So from that compressor, now we'll go into the Waves tuner. And the reason I would run the compressor before the tuner is because I want to send a strong signal into the tuner. That way the tuner doesn't have any issues trying to figure out what note was what. It's getting a nice strong signal feeding into it from the compressor. Right, so there's that. And then next in line would be my EQ for the voice. And in this case, I've cut out everything from 150 on the low side. And then also I took out a bit of the 400 range. And this was all kind of moving really quick. I may add some of this back, honestly. But again, it's one of those things when you're moving pretty quick in a session, it's better to cut out just a little bit more than you need to than to leave it sounding kind of boxy and hollow. But I'm going to add a little bit of that fatness back to it real quick.
You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah, girl, you running not supposed to. Yeah, now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me, baby. Got me shooting up the club, going bang bang. If you bring your home, girl, I'm going bang bang. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me. Please,
Alright, sorry about that. I stepped away for just a second. So let me hear that again. So you see now I'm getting a little clipping over here too. I might just cut this down like a half a decibel.
You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah, girl, you running not supposed to. Yeah, now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me, baby. Got me.
Okay, so That seems a little bit better. So it's not so thin, sounding, but also not like muddy sounding either. And then the next thing that I'm going to do just after that, you know, these channels are in mono, these vocal channels. So then the very last thing that I'm going to do just in this chain of things is I'm going to put a stereo phase on it to just give it a tiny bit of width. And it's so minute that maybe you won't even tell too well when I turn it on and off. But if you've got good headphones or if you've got good studio monitors, you may be able to catch the difference. But it's just taking it from sounding like it's dead square in front of you in the middle to where it's a little bit wider of a sound, and that's all that it's doing. It's very subtle.
Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah. Girl, you running, not supposed to. Yeah. Now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me.
There you go. Okay, and so then now I would kind of follow that same process with each of the other tracks. And this is highlight left, this is highlight right, and then these are the ad-libs. So on this screen, this is the highlights left, highlights right, and then the ad-libs, right? And I just kind of follow that same process with each one of these tracks then, you know, with my de-essers and compressors and whatnot. And then all of these as a group, since all of these are his vocals, these feed into this one group bus. And all a group bus is it's just like another channel, except for you're processing multiple signals at once. So with these channels here, you're mixing these against each other. Like I want the highlights to have a certain amount of volume against the main one, but they shouldn't overdo it or even stand out too much. But then once we have these mixed where we want to against each other, then now they feed into this group, and I process them as a single signal. So they all feed in here now mixed the way that they already are, and then my multiband compressor is going to affect that whole signal. And just to kind of demonstrate that, what I'll do is I'll just solo this channel.
Going bang bang. If you bring your home, girl, I'm going bang bang. Ride it on me.
As opposed to where over here I could get just the single left channel, or just the single right channel, or the center channel, right? They're individual. But if I solo this group, you'll hear everything that feeds into this group. All right, so now I'm going to process all of these as a mix here in the bus. So the first thing I'm going to turn on again, just like on the instrumental, I'm going to put it through a multiband compressor.
Put that ass on me, baby. Got me shooting, yeah.
Okay, and now when this cuts on,
come here, baby, let me bite that. Yeah, you know you my little baby.
Okay, so when I turn it on, you hear it seems like it gets quieter, right? And that's because the very final output that I have on this multiband compressor, I do have it cutting to a -6. Right, so I've reduced the main volume on this to -6 volume. That way, even if I boost anything else or anything pops through, it's never going to be louder than -6, because that's what I have the output volume to at the highest, right? So I have that to -6, so it seems like it gets quieter, and it kind of does. But that's because then it's going to feed into something else, right? And that's going to be either an EQ or a compressor or a limiter, right? And possibly all of them. Right, in most cases, at least the compressor and limiter. The EQ is the only one that maybe I do or don't use, and that's going to be if I specifically need to get like a specific frequency out of there that's offending sounding, as to where you can see with this multiband compressor, it basically is an EQ. You can turn your lows and highs up, right, but it's by group, and you can't kind of fine tune a specific frequency, as to where like on an actual EQ. I can, fine tune to a very sharp point and pull out any specific frequency that might be offensive from anywhere, right? And so with a multiband compressor, you can't do that. So I may or may not use the EQ if I need to do something surgical, but otherwise, if it sounds good kind of as it is already and I don't need to pull out any specific frequencies, or if I don't have time, then I just don't do the EQ. I generally EQ everything if I have the time, like it's a project where, you know, we're working on like a bigger project that's going to be monetized or something like that. But if we're doing like a 1 hour session or something like that, maybe we're recording songs over free beats, like demos, you know, basically, then, you know, we might not have the time for me to go through and EQ sweep everything and find resonant frequencies and whatnot. We would more just make big adjustments across the spectrum with like a multiband. Okay, so in this case, I wasn't using the EQ. So then the next thing would be the compressor. And so now, again, this is a group compression, right? So each one of these channels is being compressed individually, but now it's all feeding through this one compressor. So first through the multiband compressor and now through this compressor. And I kind of have the same goals. I'm looking for around -3 kind of hover point right there. And it may pop lower than that on the gain reduction, and we may get moments where there's just no gain reduction going on, but I kind of want it to hover just around or below -3, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then with my attack times and release times and ratio and knee, I'm listening to it. And that's kind of all I can say on that. When you kind of have to know what you're listening for, and that comes with time, you can kind of use these as good starting points, though. Right. So, but now let's listen to when I turn the compressor on these.
Let me bite that. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah. Girl, you running not supposed to. Yeah. Now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me.
Yeah, so in this case, I would maybe... Yeah, so if you can see, I am doing more than I want to here, where I left it. So like I said, I generally would shoot for around a -3, but again, I'm going to listen to it. And you can see that it is compressing more than -3 here. But if you look at the signal on it too, you see that it gets quieter and louder and quieter and louder. And usually that means that they're moving their head around a bunch in front of the microphone. So they're like getting into the microphone, out of the microphone, into the, just like this, like right. You can hear when I get away from the microphone and then right when I'm right in front of it. Right, and so that same thing is going on in the booth where they're moving in front of the microphone and away from the microphone, right? Because they're kind of in the vibe or whatever, and they're feeling it. Which I stop people a lot if they're doing it too much. I will stop them and have them redo the take. So it doesn't happen a whole bunch at my studio, but it still does happen. You know, just people are going to move around a little bit, and the microphone picks all of that up. And so what's going on is that it's trying to compensate for it, or I'm trying to compensate for it by compressing a little bit more. So that's what's going on here, and why we are compressing more than we are, more than my target, I should say. But it sounds level, though. It sounds like smooth, like all the same volume, right? So the point of compression, of course, is just to make the audio sound level, like there's not a loud part and a quiet part. It's just to kind of make everything sound about the same volume. And that's all it really does. And so since this sounds pretty well level, about all the same volume, then I'm going to feed it into the next thing. And that's going to be the final limiter for the vocal channel. And the thing about limiters is they're really, really surgical, I guess you could say, right? Like they don't have like a ratio like a compressor does, or an attack time and a release time, right? They're just instant. If something crosses the line and is gain reduced, it's hard cut. Like it's just cut. But also, unlike a compressor, the second it goes back above that threshold, then just the volume is unchanged instantly, right? So they are great for like keeping things below a certain peak level. And they do maybe add a tiny bit of distortion, but not even like compressors do, right? Compressors, if you have too fast of an attack and release time, you're going to get a bunch of distortion out of that, as to where limiters don't. So that's kind of why I would always run a hard, like a brick wall limiter at the very end of my vocal signal chain. because I don't want it's just to capture just those really loud peaks or pops that might bust through just your settings for your compressor. So like maybe your compressor settings sound great where they are, but there's still like a dynamic pop, you know, just one or two that maybe just at that moment he got way too close to the mic or whatever it might be, and it's just going to catch that type of stuff. And it's going to be just instantaneous, keeping it under control, you know, with not very much distortion or anything like that. So it's a great tool to boost that final signal, right? Because then you can set your final output, which I have, to -6, right? So it's not going to let any signal through that's higher than -6. And so then now you just you can start from 0 and just boost the volume up until you start getting some gain reduction, and then you know you're kind of normalized at -6. And so that's kind of what we're working with now. So now let's hear it again with the compressor. Well, basically everything running now except for the limiter on the vocals, and then we'll start getting into the mastering. All right, so.
Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah. Girl, you running, not supposed to. Yeah. Now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me, baby. Got me shooting up the club, going bang bang. If you bring your home, girl, I'm going bang bang. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me, please, baby.
Okay, so at the most it reduced, what is it? It says 4.5 decibels. So we did 4.5 decibels of gain reduction at the very most. So it's not very much. And you saw the meter popping down. It was somewhere around this area, and we have a whole meter that it could, you know, squeeze down. So we didn't do a ton. Still, the less you can do, the better everything always sounds. But at this point, we've kind of got the vocals, all the dynamics and EQing under control. That would be the end of the vocal chain. And so now we would get into throwing in the reverbs and delays, and then our mastering over all of it. So the mastering, when we do that, it's going to affect not only just the vocals, but also the instrumental. Like all of the audio ends up at this one channel here, and then we process it as a whole, and that's mastering. That's the master channel. But we're also going to have a reverb and delay bus, and these feed into the master channel also. So now I'm going to turn on the delay first, and the delay is just like an echo, right? So we'll hear it as I turn the echo on, and it's very subtle too. Maybe actually I'll mute out the instrumental for a moment, and I'll let you hear just the delay when I turn it on over just the vocals. So that's dry.
Come here, baby, let me bite that. Yeah, you know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah, girl, you running, not supposed to. Yeah, now the train gon' come and get you.
And then the reverb is like a hall effect, right? So the reverb makes it sound like you're in a room or something, as to where the delay is just an echo. Your reverb makes it sound like you're kind of in a cathedral or something like that. And so now I'll cut on the reverb.
Yeah. Come here, baby, let me bite that. Yeah, you know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah, girl, you running, not supposed to. Yeah, now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me.
Okay, so then now we've got our vocals mixed, and we've got the reverb and the delay in there. Let's bring the instrumental back, and then let's start working on our mastering. Let me see what those notifications were. Oh, you know, that's just YouTube. That is just YouTube. False alarm, guys. False alarm. Okay, so let's start with some mastering now.
Yeah.
Very first thing is going to be a compressor.
Yeah, you know you my little baby.
And all I'm looking for on my master compressor, I want to do very little to it, but there's something specific that I'm trying to achieve here also. For my gain reduction, I personally am looking to get around 0.8 of a decibel on gain reduction, maybe topping off at 1 decibel, right? But 0.5 to 0.8 is kind of where I like to be, and I'm doing very little on the ratio. You see 1.5, right? And your ratio is that thing right there. You see when I move that, what's happening on the graph? And that's showing you where it's cutting the volume. So it would be a hard cut at negative like 10 decibels if I did it right here. But I don't want to compress it that hard, so 1.5 is where I generally, and you can see it's just barely lower than 0, right? So just straight across here is 0, and I'm just barely compressing. And then on my gain reduction, like I said, 0.8 of a decibel is all I want to reduce. My attack time and my release time are currently set to the templated number that I have them set to, which is a pretty slow attack time, 45 milliseconds before it starts to take effect, and then a really slow release time to 400 milliseconds. But that's based on the most common beat per minute of songs that tend to be recorded at the studio. They're usually like hip-hop songs, right? And so they're mostly within a certain range of beats per minute. And 400 milliseconds on a release time is roughly about a quarter note for that range of that genre, I guess you could say, of music, the beats per minute for those. But if it was a much slower song or a faster song, then I would do a little bit of math and figure out what my release time should be, because I'm looking for the release time to be roughly about a quarter note of time for whatever the song is. And I usually have a little note right in front of me to remember the math, because I tend to forget it, and if I do forget it, I just look it up every single time. But generally, it's something like you take 60,000 or something divided by the beats per minute, so divided by 145, and then it's going to give you a number, and then that's what your release milliseconds should be, right? So you can calculate what your release needs to be on your mastering compressor. Your attack time is going to still be from fill, though, but you don't want to do a whole bunch. You kind of want to let the kick drum punch through it and then feel some pullback on the compression, right? Then it should pull the volume back a little bit, but let the kick drum come through. And then you want to release it just before that next kick drum comes, which is usually like a quarter note or a half note, right? So that's why your release time would be around that time. So that way the compression has already stopped taking effect for that next kick drum to hit, and it'll punch hard, and then the volume pulls back a little bit again, lets up right before that next kick drum punches hard again. So that's kind of what we're going with here, with the 45 and 40 for my attack and release times on there. So generally, if it sounds good just with these attack and release times, then I just leave it there. But otherwise, like I said, if it is a faster or slower song, then I'm going to do my math on my release time.
Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that
and so that's very subtle. And you can see I'm not doing any boosting on the gain. It's just right at 0. So I could boost it, right? Or I could cut it. But I just have the output right to 0. So it's not adding any volume or cutting any volume other than the gain reduction that the compressor is doing. So this 0.9 of a decibel that we're seeing gain reduced right there, that's the only volume change that's happening here. I'm not boosting or cutting the output volume. So now we've lost a decibel, or we've cut 0.9 of a decibel here at the compressor. Next thing in line is going to be an equalizer again. On this one, I would only do anything else if I generally need to, but I've got these very, very subtle changes that I kind of have just on there all the time. Just on when the template pops up, I've already got 20 hertz and down cut, kind of hard cut out of the EQ, and then I've got a very small amount of boost on 800.3, just to add a little bit of warmth, because you can tend to lose a bit of warmth in the mixing process. And then just a hair, 0.7, not even a decibel of boost with a shelf at 4600, just to add a bit of brightness, just an extra little bit of brightness, and it's very, very subtle. So looking at the EQ, you can't even tell that much has been moved. You can barely tell, right? And it's doing very little. So when I turn this on and off, you're not going to hear much of a difference. The cutting off the 20 hertz and below, that's just because we can't hear it anyway. So anything below that is just adding signal that we don't need, and it's costing us compression and volume and all of that stuff. So let's just get it out of there. That's kind of what's going on here. So I'm going to turn it on and off.
That ass on me, please, baby. Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me.
All right, and then the very last thing is going to be the final limiter.
Running not supposed to. Yeah. Now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me. Baby. Got me shooting up the club going bang bang. If you bring your home.
Okay, and this I'll still maybe will adjust a little bit. Now at the final output I have limited to negative 0.5 of a decibel, and that's because Spotify and Amazon Music and all of those iTunes, that's the range that they're looking for. They want the max volume to be 0.5 decibels lower than 0, right? So I do have the brick wall limiter at the very end. The output knob is not set out to max, it's to 0, it's set to 0.5, so we're cutting just a half a decibel there. And then the boost, then just like on the instrumental, then I'm just going to boost it from there to get the sound that I'm looking for. And sometimes, just depending on the instrumental and how it's mixed, it might not be mixed very well, and so you have to do more compression or limiting to get those things under control. And in this case, I'm probably having a gain reduce quite a bit more than I want to, but you can look at the sine wave and you see there's just loud pop right there when the kick drum hits. So there's just some other mixing stuff that would need to be done on the instrumental itself, in the instrumentals mix, that I don't have access to because I don't have the mix for the instrumental. I only have the stereo file. So I can't reduce just the kick drum or limit just the kick drum. It's going to end up limiting everything because that's how I have it. And that's how I've received it. But so then what I'm going to look for then is I'm going to look at my spectrums and see where everything's at. If I hear anything that's offensive, I'm going to try to find where it's at on the graph and then pinpoint it and then get rid of it with the EQ. I like to use this one to look at my stereo field and make sure that I'm kind of getting a full sound all around in stereo. And then I look at this and I'm looking for around negative 14 in my short term, as high as negative 10. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. But again, it's not always the same numbers for everything.
Girl, I'm going bang bang, ride it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me, please, baby. Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah, you know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah, girl, you running not supposed to. Yeah, now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me. Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah, you know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah, girl, you running not supposed to. Yeah, now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me, baby. Got me shooting up the club going bang bang. If you bring your home, girl, I'm going bang bang. Grind it on me. Yeah, put that ass on me, please, baby.
Just do what we do. You know I like it.
Yeah, yeah. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah. Girl, you running, not supposed to. Yeah. Now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me, baby. Got me shooting up the club, going bang bang. If you bring your home, girl, I'm going bang bang. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me, please, baby. Yeah. Come on, baby, let me bite that. Yeah. You know you my little baby. You know you drive me crazy. The way you grind on me. You put that ass on me, baby. Yeah. Girl, you running, not supposed to. Yeah. Now the train gon' come and get you. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me, baby. Got me shooting up the club, going bang bang. If you bring your home, girl, I'm going bang bang. Grind it on me. Yeah. Put that ass on me, please, baby.
Okay, so I think that sounds pretty good. I got all my metering kind of where I want it. And let's see. And we've been recording for just about 46 minutes. So that's almost just about the time that a session would probably take anyway, because probably 15 minutes we would be tracking vocals, right? And then after that we would kind of knock all of this stuff out. Or we would kind of touch on just everything as we go. But so then I would call it good. I would go ahead and render this on down and get ready for my next appointment at the start of the next hour. That should conclude this test. Let's check that audio. Cut.